My name is Eleanor, and I am 78 years old. I have lived my entire life in the small town of Cedar Grove, in the house my late husband, Thomas, built with his own hands. Behind that house stood the treehouse he crafted for our children, a place of laughter, secrets, and countless summer nights under the stars. That treehouse was sacred to me. It held memories of love, childhood innocence, and the man I lost far too soon. I never thought it would become the place where my own flesh and blood would try to end my life. The smell of smoke was the first thing that ripped through my sleep that night. I was lying on the small cot inside the treehouse, enjoying a nostalgic moment under the rafters where Thomas had carved our initials decades ago. I had gone up there to think, to escape the tension brewing with my son David and my daughter Clara over the inheritance of our land. But what I woke up to wasn't peace. It was death licking at the wooden walls. Flames curled upward like evil fingers, devouring the edges of the treehouse as smoke filled my lungs. I coughed violently, trying to breathe, but the door was jammed. The heat pressed against my skin, and I knew I was trapped. Through the rising smoke, I saw movement below. Two figures stood at the foot of the tree. My heart dropped as I recognized the silhouettes. David and Clara. My children. They weren't screaming for help. They weren't calling the fire department. They were standing there, watching. David's face was cold, his hands in his pockets. Clara held something metallic, my own lighter. My knees buckled as betrayal flooded through me. My son and daughter had set the treehouse on fire, and they were watching me burn. Why? The answer clawed at the back of my mind as the flames roared louder. I tried to open the window, but the old wood splintered under my shaking hands. The smoke thickened, stinging my eyes, and I felt the world spinning. My heart screamed, "Is this how it ends? At the hands of my own children?" But then, something inside me, something stronger than fear, awakened. I wasn't going to let them win. Thomas didn't build this treehouse for me to die in it. Justice doesn't burn that easy. With one last surge of strength, I grabbed a broken beam and smashed the window open. The fire roared louder, almost as if it were furious that I dared to fight back. I could barely see, barely breathe, but I climbed out onto the branch Thomas had reinforced years ago. The flames chased me, but I wasn't going to let them have me. Not tonight. As I slid down the trunk, scraping my arms and legs, I caught their eyes. David's face turned pale, and Clara took a step back. They didn't expect me to make it out alive. My heart pounded with rage as I stumbled onto the grass. I opened my mouth to scream at them, to ask why, but before I could speak, David grabbed Clara's hand and they ran, disappearing into the darkness, like the cowards they were. I collapsed to my knees, my breath coming in ragged gasps as the treehouse burned behind me. I should have called the police right then. I should have crawled into the house and locked every door. But something inside me whispered, "Not yet. Don't show them you're alive. Not until the time is right." And so, I stayed quiet. I let the world believe I was gone. I let my children believe their plan had worked. Because sometimes, the only way to truly get justice is to let the enemy think they've won. But what they didn't know was that I had survived, and I was going to make sure they paid for every spark they lit that night. The inheritance they wanted so badly, it was about to become their worst nightmare. This is only the beginning. You won't believe what happened next. If you want to know how a mother fights back against the ultimate betrayal, please like, comment, and subscribe because this story is only getting started. When the flames died out and the treehouse stood as nothing more than charred bones against the night sky, I crawled back into the shadows of my own yard. My body trembled, not only from the burns on my arms and the smoke still clawing at my lungs, but from the weight of the truth. My own children had tried to murder me. The woman who gave them life. The same woman who sacrificed everything so they could have the best education, the best clothes, the best chance in this world. I hid behind the shed as I watched the fire department arrive. A neighbor must have called them after seeing the glow. The firefighters rushed in, spraying water, shouting orders, and shaking their heads at the destruction. None of them looked for me. Not one voice cried, "Where is Eleanor?" Because the voices that mattered, my sons, my daughters, had already ensured nobody would ask. I stayed low, crouched in the mud, and watched David and Clara from a distance. They stood together, pretending to cry, their arms around each other like actors in a tragedy they had written themselves. The chief asked them questions, and I could see Clara shaking her head, whispering something about an accident. David's face was a mask of grief so convincing it could have fooled the devil himself. My stomach turned as I realized just how far they were willing to go for the inheritance. You might be wondering, why didn't I walk up to the chief right then and there, point at them, and scream the truth? Because I had no proof. It would be their word against mine, and I was the frail old woman who sometimes forgets things. They'd paint me as crazy, confused, maybe even suicidal. No, I couldn't fight them with anger alone. I needed a plan. I needed to think like them, but smarter. So, I stayed hidden until the sirens faded and my children drove away in David's truck, their faces lit by the cold blue of the flashing lights. Only when the night fell silent again did I slip into my house through the back door. The smell of smoke clung to my skin, and my reflection in the hallway mirror looked like a ghost, my hair singed, my eyes bloodshot, and my hands trembling. But inside that battered body, my heart burned hotter than the fire they set. For the next few days, I vanished. To the world, I was gone. To my children, I was ash scattered to the wind. I slept in an old cabin miles away, one Thomas and I had kept secret for fishing trips. It was hidden deep in the woods, a place even David and Clara never knew existed. There, I cleaned my wounds, gathered my strength, and began to piece together every shred of evidence I could find. I went through old documents, property deeds, and my will. I saw where their eyes had lingered in recent months, what papers they had asked about, what keys they had tried to borrow. They wanted everything: my house, the land, Thomas's savings, even the jewelry passed down from my mother. But they were greedy fools. In their rush to kill me, they had left traces. The lighter Clara used was missing from my drawer. My son's boots, the ones I had seen near the fire, had a distinct scorch mark I had noticed days earlier. I kept it all in mind. You see, when someone tries to erase you, they never think about the things you notice, the tiny cracks in their perfect lies. And I noticed everything. But the more I dug, the more I realized this wasn't just about the inheritance.
No.
This had been brewing for years. The cold stares, the whispered conversations, the way they always pushed me to sign papers, I didn't understand fully. They weren't just trying to claim what was mine. They were trying to erase me completely. One rainy afternoon, as I sat in the cabin flipping through an old photo album, I heard a car passing on the dirt road far away. My heart stopped. Hardly anyone drove this way. I peeked through the curtains, and there it was, David's truck, creeping slowly, as if he were hunting something. Or someone. My breath caught. They didn't believe I was dead. They were looking to make sure. I stayed still, my fingers tightening around the old hunting rifle Thomas had left in the cabin. I didn't want to use it, but I would if I had to. The truck lingered for a moment, then rolled away, leaving only the echo of my racing heart behind. That night, as the storm raged outside, I made my decision. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was war. They thought they could burn me, but fire only forges steel. I was going to let them think they were winning. I was going to let them get comfortable, cocky even. And when the time came, I would strike in a way they'd never see coming. The inheritance they wanted? I was about to turn it into a weapon. But just as I began planning my next move, a knock came at the cabin door. Slow, deliberate. My hands froze. Nobody knew I was here. Nobody except Thomas. And he was long gone. I grabbed the rifle, my heart pounding in my ears, and inched toward the door. Whoever was on the other side wasn't knocking like a friend. When I swung it open, rain poured in, and there stood someone I hadn't seen in decades, someone whose return would change everything. The rain cascaded off the stranger's hat, dripping onto the wooden porch. I squinted through the dim light, my hands trembling as I gripped the rifle. Then the figure stepped forward, and my heart stopped. Eleanor, the voice said, low and rough, but achingly familiar. It was Samuel, my husband's younger brother, the one who had disappeared from town nearly 30 years ago after a family feud no one ever fully understood. He looked older, worn by life, but his eyes, those piercing gray eyes, were still sharp. I lowered the rifle, my chest tight with disbelief. "Samuel? How did you find me?" I stammered. "I heard about the fire," he said, glancing around as if expecting someone to jump out of the trees. "And I knew they would try something like this. David and Clara, they're not the children you remember." My knees buckled, and I leaned against the doorframe. "You know?" He nodded grimly. "More than you think." Lightning split the sky as Samuel stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He shook the rain off his coat and looked me dead in the eye. "You're not safe, Eleanor. They're not finished. They'll come for you again. They think you're the only thing standing between them and everything Thomas left behind." His words were like daggers, cutting through the thin hope I'd been holding onto. I poured him a cup of coffee with shaking hands and sat across from him. "Why now, Samuel? Why come back after all these years?" He took a long sip before answering. "Because I owe Thomas. And because there are things you need to know about the land, about what's really at stake. It's not just the inheritance. There's more." My heart pounded as he unfolded a stack of papers from his bag. Old deeds, letters, documents that looked decades old. Among them was one paper that made my blood run cold. It was a secret trust Thomas had created before he died, one that named me as the sole controller of not just our home, but several acres of land I didn't even know we owned. Land worth millions today. Samuel leaned closer. "David found out about this. That's why they're desperate. They want it all, Eleanor. And they'll kill anyone who stands in their way, even you." The room spun as I clutched the papers to my chest. So this was the root of their hatred, the fuel behind their evil. My own children, blinded by greed, had turned into monsters. But Samuel wasn't done. He slid a small USB drive across the table. "I've been watching them, recording things. They're sloppy, Eleanor. You'll find everything you need to bring them down on this." I stared at the tiny device, my hands trembling. Hope flickered like a fragile flame. Finally, I had something, evidence. But the question gnawed at me. Could I use it before they struck again? That night, sleep eluded me. Every creak of the cabin made my heart race. I kept the rifle close, my eyes fixed on the dark window. Samuel slept in the chair, one hand resting on his old revolver. We were two ghosts, haunted by the same betrayal, waiting for dawn to bring answers. When the sun rose, I plugged the USB into Samuel's battered laptop. The videos made my stomach churn. Footage of David and Clara in hushed conversations, talking about the fire, about making it look like an accident, about the old woman finally gone. Their words were ice in my veins. But the last recording was the worst. Clara laughing as she said, "If she survives, we'll just try again." My hands clenched into fists. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they could break me. As Samuel and I discussed our next move, a sound shattered the quiet morning, the crunch of tires on gravel. My head snapped toward the window. David's truck. He had found the cabin. Samuel grabbed his revolver. "Stay back," he whispered. But it was too late. The truck door slammed, and heavy footsteps approached. My breath caught as shadows moved outside. They weren't here to talk. They were here to finish what they started. The doorknob turned slowly. My heart pounded louder than the storm that was now rolling back over the hills. Samuel raised his weapon, and I tightened my grip on the rifle. The door creaked open, and there they stood. David, his face twisted with fury, and Clara, her eyes dark and cold. "Hello, Mother," David sneered. "You weren't supposed to be alive." The room erupted in chaos. The first second felt like an eternity. David's eyes locked on Samuel's revolver, then on my rifle, and for a split moment, none of us moved. The rain outside battered the roof like war drums, and my heart beat even louder. Clara stood slightly behind him, her lips curled into a smile that chilled me to the bone. She wasn't scared. She was enjoying this. Samuel's voice cut through the tension, sharp and steady. "Turn around and walk away, David. Don't make me do something I'll regret." David chuckled, a low, bitter laugh. Regret? You've been gone for decades, Uncle Sam. You have no idea what's going on here. This is between me and her. He jerked his head toward me like I was nothing more than an object to be disposed of. Clara stepped forward, holding something small and shiny in her hand. My stomach dropped when I realized it was the same lighter she had used the night of the fire. She twirled it casually, her eyes locked on mine. You should have stayed in that treehouse, Mother. You had a perfect ending waiting for you. Samuel's revolver cocked with a sharp click. Drop it, Clara. She smirked. Or what? You'll shoot your own niece. The standoff crackled with more electricity than the storm outside. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to act, but I forced myself to stay calm. Think, Eleanor. Think like Thomas would. My husband had always said, the smartest move isn't the loudest one. It's the one no one sees coming. Slowly, I stepped back toward the table, my fingers brushing against the USB drive. If I could get it to safety, the evidence on it would end this nightmare once and for all. But as soon as my hand touched it, David lunged forward. Samuel fired a warning shot into the ceiling, the blast shaking the cabin. Don't move another step, he barked. David froze for a moment, his jaw clenched, but his eyes burned with hatred. You think you can scare me with that? I've been planning this too long to stop now. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, mixing with the scent of rain-soaked wood. My knees trembled, but I refused to show fear. Instead, I spoke, my voice steady even as my heart thundered. You'll never get what you want, David. Not the house. Not the land. Not a single dime. Because everything your father built, the land, the legacy, it's protected in ways you'll never understand. His face twisted with rage. You think some piece of paper is going to stop me? Yes, I said coldly. And so will the law when they see this. I held up the USB drive. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in Clara's eyes. She hissed, "Get it from her," and David lunged again. The next seconds blurred into chaos. Samuel shoved me aside and aimed his revolver as David charged. The two men collided, the gun firing wildly into the wall. Clara screamed and rushed toward me, the lighter sparking in her hand. I swung the rifle, not to fire, but to knock it from her grasp. The lighter clattered across the floor, sliding under the table. Enough, I shouted, my voice breaking with years of pain and anger. You're my children, but tonight, you've made yourselves my enemies. Do you even realize what you've done? For a split second, they hesitated. The storm outside howled, lightning flashing through the window, casting monstrous shadows across their faces. But instead of remorse, I saw only cold determination. We're not leaving without it, Clara hissed. David tore himself free from Samuel's grip and grabbed me by the arm. His fingers dug into my skin, and he growled in my ear. Hand it over, or I'll finish what we started. Something inside me snapped. I looked him straight in the eye and whispered, "Try me." Before he could react, Samuel slammed the butt of his revolver against David's shoulder, sending him crashing to the floor. Clara screamed and lunged toward the USB, but I was faster. I kicked it into my boot and glared down at her. "You'll never find it," I said. Sirens wailed in the distance. Samuel must have called the police before they arrived, or maybe a neighbor heard the gunshot. Either way, David and Clara's eyes widened with panic. They bolted toward the door, vanishing into the storm before the flashing lights appeared. The police arrived minutes later, questioning Samuel and me, but we kept the USB hidden. We knew this wasn't over. David and Clara had escaped, and they weren't the type to give up easily. The officers promised to search for them, but I saw the doubt in their eyes. As the patrol cars drove away, Samuel turned to me. "You know they'll come back, Eleanor. They won't stop." I clutched the USB tight in my hand. "Then neither will I. Next time, I'll be ready." The cabin felt smaller, darker, as the night crept back in. I knew I couldn't stay there forever. I needed to move, to outthink them, to strike before they did. But before I could even plan my next move, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number lit up the screen. It read, "You can run, Mother, but you can't hide forever." The next fire will be bigger. And this time, you won't walk away. My blood turned to ice. The message on my phone glowed like a threat from hell. My hands trembled as I stared at it, reading it over and over. You can run, Mother. But you can't hide forever. The next fire will be bigger. And this time, you won't walk away. The words felt like claws tightening around my throat. David and Clara weren't just angry. They were hunting me. Samuel leaned over my shoulder, his jaw tightening as he read it. They're escalating, he said. We need to get ahead of them before they make their next move. I nodded, though fear coiled in my stomach. My own children were plotting to burn me alive, again. But this time, they were warning me, taunting me, almost daring me to stop them. I wasn't just fighting for my life anymore. I was fighting to protect Thomas's legacy, to protect the truth, and to make sure no one else ever suffered at their hands. We packed what little we had and left the cabin before dawn. The rain had stopped, leaving the forest eerily quiet, as if it knew what was coming. Samuel drove his old truck while I sat beside him, clutching the USB drive like a lifeline. Inside that tiny device was the proof that would destroy them. But proof meant nothing if I couldn't stay alive long enough to use it. We decided to head back to town, to my house, the place where all of this started. It felt like walking straight into the lion's den, but I needed my documents, my safe box, everything they might try to take or destroy. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. When we pulled up to the house, the memories hit me like a flood. Thomas's rose bushes lined the walkway, their petals heavy with dew. The old oak tree stood tall, its branches swaying in the breeze. And in the distance, the blackened remains of the treehouse still smoldered in my mind. My chest tightened, but I squared my shoulders. This is my home. They won't take it from me. Inside, everything seemed untouched at first glance. But Samuel, ever cautious, walked through every room with his revolver drawn. In the kitchen, we found a single matchbox sitting on the counter, almost like a calling card. My stomach dropped. They had been here. Recently. Eleanor, Samuel said quietly. They're watching you. I nodded, my heart pounding. Let them watch. I'll show them they picked the wrong woman to mess with. We secured the documents and locked everything in a fireproof safe Samuel had brought with him. Then I sat at the table with the USB drive and my laptop. My hand shook as I opened the files again, this time copying them onto multiple drives and sending the videos to a secure email account. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. Hours later, as the sun dipped low, a knock sounded at the door. My heart leapt into my throat. Samuel motioned for me to stay back as he approached cautiously, revolver in hand. Who is it? He called. A voice, sweet and deceptive, floated through the door. It's me, Mom. It's Clara. Please, I just want to talk. Every hair on my body stood on end. Samuel shot me a look that said, don't open it. But I stepped forward anyway, peering through the small peephole. Clara stood there, tears streaking her face, her hands empty. She looked like the little girl I once rocked to sleep. But I wasn't fooled. I cracked the door just an inch. What do you want? I asked, my voice sharp. Mom, I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. David's gone crazy. I didn't want to go along with it, but he forced me. Please, let me in. I need your help. Samuel hissed under his breath. She's lying. But something in me, the mother in me, hesitated. Could she really be regretting it? Or was this another trap? Before I could decide, movement flickered in the corner of my eye. A shadow shifted by the side of the house. Samuel saw it too. His gun came up in an instant. Step back, Eleanor, he warned. And then it happened. Glass shattered as a Molotov cocktail exploded against the side of the house, flames bursting up the wall. I screamed as Samuel yanked me back. Clara's face twisted into something cruel and dark as she stepped aside, revealing David behind her, holding another bottle filled with fire. Say goodbye, Mother, David growled. The house erupted in chaos as Samuel fired a shot, forcing them to retreat for a moment. Flames licked at the curtains, smoke filled the air, and the heat rose fast. The fire alarm screamed, but the only thing louder was my pounding heart. Out the back, Samuel shouted, grabbing my arm. We stumbled through the smoke, coughing and choking, barely making it out before the roof began to crackle. The house I had lived in for 50 years, Thomas's house, was burning before my eyes. And David stood across the street, smiling like the devil himself. "You can't hide forever, Mother," he shouted over the roar of the fire. I clutched Samuel's arm, tears streaming down my face. The house collapsed in flames, taking with it decades of memories. But not my resolve. No, losing my home didn't break me, it hardened me. As the fire consumed everything, I whispered, "This isn't the end, David. It's just the beginning." The police arrived too late, as always. David and Clara vanished into the night, leaving nothing but destruction behind. But they had made one mistake. They thought burning my house would burn my spirit. They were wrong. I still had the evidence. I still had my life. And now, I had nothing left to lose. That night, Samuel and I made a vow. We were going to take them down legally, publicly, and completely. The next time I faced them, it wouldn't be as a victim. It would be as their reckoning. But as we prepared to leave the ashes behind, Samuel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his face going pale. "It's them," he said. He answered, and David's voice came through, calm and cold.
"Run, old man.
Run while you can, because the next time we meet, neither of you is walking away." The line went dead. We drove through the night with nothing but the headlights cutting through the darkness. Behind us, the glow of my burning house still lit the horizon like a cruel reminder of what I had lost. My hands trembled in my lap as I clutched the USB drive, now hidden deep in my coat pocket. That tiny device was the only weapon I had left against them. Samuel's face was grim as he kept his eyes on the road. "We can't go to the police just yet," he said quietly. "Not without making sure they can't twist this against you. David's smart. He'll spin this fire as your accident, and Clara will back him up." I stared out the window at the blur of trees rushing past. "Then what do we do?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How do you fight your own children?" Samuel glanced at me, his jaw tight. "By stopping thinking of them as your children. They stopped being that the night they tried to kill you." His words cut deep, but they were true. Whatever love I had for David and Clara had been burned away with the house. What remained was something sharper, colder, resolve. We arrived at an old safe house Samuel owned on the edge of another county. It was small and hidden, but it was enough to keep us breathing while we planned our next move. The first thing we did was secure copies of the evidence onto multiple hidden drives and a cloud account Samuel swore was impossible to trace. As the days passed, we started piecing together a plan. Samuel knew people, lawyers, private investigators, even a retired detective who owed him a favor. One by one, we brought them in, quietly building a case strong enough to crush David and Clara when the time came. But as we gathered proof, their threats only grew louder. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night. Letters slipped under the door with words like burn and die. Once, we found a dead crow nailed to the porch. Every act was a reminder that they were watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. One evening, Samuel stepped outside to take a call. When he came back in, his face was pale. "What is it?" I asked, fear creeping into my voice. "They've emptied your accounts," he said. "Every last penny. They hacked into the joint accounts you had with the house. They're cutting off your resources." My chest tightened. They weren't just trying to kill me. They were stripping me of everything, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. But instead of despair, a fire rose in me. "Let them," I said through clenched teeth. "Money can be replaced. Justice cannot." The next morning, we went to meet Samuel's lawyer friend, a sharp man named Richard who specialized in exposing fraud. He looked over the evidence, his eyebrows rising with every video, every recording. "This," he said, tapping the USB drive, "is enough to destroy them legally. But we need more. Something that ties their hands completely, something they can't spin or erase." That night, while reviewing the footage again, I saw something I had missed before. In one of the videos, behind David and Clara as they spoke, a stack of papers sat on the table. The top sheet was a forged signature, my signature. They were faking documents to transfer property rights. "This is it," I whispered. "If we find those papers, we have them." Samuel nodded. "Then we get them. But we have to be careful. They'll be expecting us to do something." We began preparing, gathering everything we needed to retrieve the original forged documents from wherever they were hiding them. The plan was risky, but it was the only way. The following night, under the cover of darkness, Samuel and I crept back toward the town where David had been hiding out. Through the trees, we spotted his truck parked outside an abandoned warehouse, the same place Samuel suspected they were keeping all their illegal documents. My heart pounded as we approached. The warehouse loomed like a beast, its windows glowing faintly from the light inside. Voices echoed, David and Clara arguing. "Why haven't we destroyed them yet?" Clara hissed. "Because I'm not done with her," David growled. "I want her to suffer first." I clenched my fists, rage boiling inside me. Samuel motioned for me to stay quiet as we slipped inside through a side door. We moved through the shadows, every step feeling like it could be our last. There it was, the table with the documents stacked neatly on top. Samuel grabbed them while I kept watch. My heart raced as I stuffed the papers into my bag. Just as we turned to leave, a loud crash echoed behind us. David stood in the doorway, a crowbar in his hand, his face twisted in fury. "You just couldn't stay dead, could you?" Clara stepped out from behind him, holding a can of gasoline. My stomach dropped. Samuel raised his revolver, but David laughed. "Go ahead. Shoot me. You'll never get out of here alive." The air grew thick with the smell of gasoline as Clara poured it across the floor, her eyes locked on mine. "You're not leaving this place, Mother," she said softly. "This time, we'll watch the fire burn with you inside it." David struck a match. The flame flickered, dancing in the air between us. The tiny flame from David's match looked harmless at first, but I knew it was death waiting to spread. He held it high, grinning like a madman, while Clara stood behind him with the gasoline can, pouring the last of it onto the floor. The fumes burned my throat, the smell of gasoline so strong it made me dizzy. Samuel tightened his grip on his revolver, his jaw clenched. "David, put it out. Don't do this. You'll burn alive in here too." David smirked. "Then we all go together." His voice was cold, almost gleeful. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but loud enough to cut through the tension. "David, listen to me. You're my son. You are supposed to protect me, not kill me." His grin widened, cruel and empty. "You stopped being my mother the day you chose money over me." Tears welled in my eyes. "This isn't about money. It's about your father's legacy. You think he built all of this so you could destroy it." For a flicker of a second, I saw hesitation in his eyes, but Clara's voice cut through. "Don't listen to her, David. She's lying. She's trying to make you weak. Light it." The match trembled in his fingers. The smell of gasoline grew thicker, and the heat of the flame licked the air. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Think, David," Samuel barked. "If you strike that, there's no walking away. The cops will know it was you. They'll hunt you down." David laughed bitterly. "The cops? They never cared about us. Nobody does." He took a step forward, the match lowering dangerously close to the floor. In that moment, instinct took over. I grabbed a metal rod lying nearby and hurled it at his hand. The match flew from his grip, extinguishing before it hit the floor. David roared in rage, charging toward me. Samuel fired a shot into the air, forcing him to stop. "Don't move another inch," Samuel growled, aiming directly at David's chest. Clara screamed and tried to lunge at Samuel, but I tackled her with every ounce of strength left in me. We hit the floor hard, wrestling as she clawed at my arms. "You should have died in that treehouse," she spat, her voice full of venom. I fought back, my hands shaking, my lungs burning from the gasoline fumes. "And you should have remembered what it means to be human," I shouted, shoving her off me. Samuel dragged me to my feet, and together we ran toward the side door with the bag of documents clutched tight. David lunged to grab me, but Samuel swung the revolver and struck him across the head. David collapsed, dazed but still conscious. Clara screamed his name, rushing to his side. We bolted out into the night air just as the warehouse erupted behind us, not from the match, but from the sparks of a broken electrical wire that had caught the gasoline trail. Flames roared to life, devouring the building in seconds. Samuel shoved me behind his truck, shielding me as the heat blasted against our backs. The warehouse burned bright, lighting up the night sky like a beacon of destruction. David and Clara's silhouettes appeared for a brief second in the flames before they stumbled out, coughing and choking. For a moment, our eyes met across the fire. David's glare promised that this wasn't over. Clara clung to him, her face twisted in rage. They fled into the darkness, disappearing before the sirens grew loud in the distance. We drove away before the police arrived, the bag of forged documents safe in my lap. My hands shook as I clutched it. Everything we needed to take them down was finally in our grasp. But my heart knew this wasn't the end. They would come for me again, harder than ever. Back at the safe house, Samuel spread the documents on the table, his eyes scanning them quickly.
"This is it," he said.
"With this, we can expose them for fraud, attempted murder, and theft. But we need to act fast before they disappear completely." I stared at the papers, the weight of everything crushing down on me. "Tomorrow," I said quietly. "Tomorrow, we end this." But that night, as I tried to sleep, a sound jolted me awake, a soft creak on the porch outside. My blood ran cold. I grabbed the rifle and crept to the window. There, standing in the moonlight, was David. Alone. His face was pale, his eyes wild. In his hand was something long and sharp, a hunting knife. He looked up at the window and smiled, slow and terrifying. The knife glistened in David's hand, catching the moonlight like a predator's fawn. My breath caught as I ducked from the window, pressing my back against the wall. He was here. He had found us again. This time, there would be no fire, no bluff. He had come to finish it face to face. I gripped the rifle so tightly my knuckles turned white. Samuel was already awake, creeping toward me from the other room, his revolver in hand. He gave me a look, steady, focused, that told me everything I needed to know. This was the night it ended. A floorboard outside creaked, then another. David was circling the cabin like a wolf stalking prey. The air felt thick, the silence broken only by the pounding of my own heart. Samuel whispered, "Stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't let him get inside." Before I could respond, the porch door exploded inward with a violent kick. David stepped in, his knife raised, his eyes blazing with madness. "You just don't know when to quit, do you?" he snarled. I stood frozen, every instinct screaming to run, but Samuel moved first, aiming his revolver squarely at David. "Drop the knife, David. This ends now." David laughed, a sound so cold it chilled me to the bone. "You won't shoot me. You're too soft. And her?" He jerked his head toward me. "She's too weak to stop me." That was his mistake, underestimating me. When he lunged, Samuel fired, the bullet grazing David's shoulder. He staggered but didn't fall. He charged forward like a wounded animal, slashing wildly with the knife. Samuel fired again, but the shot missed as they struggled. I couldn't just stand there. My body moved on its own. I raised the rifle, aimed, and pulled the trigger. The shot blasted through the cabin, and David dropped to his knees, the knife clattering to the floor. Blood spread across his shirt, his breathing ragged. He looked up at me, his face twisting between pain and hatred. "You shot me," he gasped. Tears blurred my vision. "You left me no choice, David." Clara's scream tore through the night. I spun around to see her standing in the doorway, her face twisted with rage, a pistol in her shaking hands. "You killed him," she shrieked. Samuel dove toward me just as the gun went off. The bullet shattered a lamp, plunging half the room into darkness. I rolled to the side, grabbing a piece of the broken table for cover. Clara kept firing, her shots wild, her voice cracking with fury. "Everything was supposed to be ours," she screamed. "You ruined everything." Samuel managed to tackle her, forcing the gun from her grip. They struggled, the weapon skidding across the floor. I scrambled to grab it, my heart racing. Clara clawed at Samuel's face, kicking and screaming, but he held her down long enough for me to aim the rifle at her. "Enough, Clara," I said, my voice shaking but strong. "It's over." For a moment, her defiance burned in her eyes, but then something shifted. She froze, breathing heavily, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You never loved us," she spat. My own tears fell as I whispered, "I loved you more than life itself. But you lost yourselves to greed. And now you've lost me too." The sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called the police after hearing the shots. Clara looked at David, who lay bleeding on the floor, then back at me. She didn't fight anymore. She just collapsed, sobbing, as Samuel secured her hands. By the time the police arrived, the chaos was over. They rushed David to the hospital under arrest. Clara was taken away in handcuffs, screaming my name like a curse. I handed the forged documents and the USB drive to the officers, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. The officers promised the evidence was more than enough to charge them with attempted murder, fraud, and arson. Finally, the law was on my side. But as they drove away with my children in custody, my heart ached. Justice doesn't heal wounds. It just stops the bleeding. Samuel put his arm around me as we watched the police cars disappear. "It's done, Eleanor. You're safe now." I looked at the horizon, where the first light of dawn broke through the clouds. "Safe," I whispered, though the word felt heavy. Safe, but not whole. In the days that followed, the trial began, and the evidence we collected sealed their fate. David and Clara were sentenced to decades behind bars. Their greed had destroyed everything they once had, and in the end, it destroyed them too. As I stood in court during the final verdict, I spoke one last time. "You tried to burn me alive, but you forgot something. Fire doesn't just destroy. It also forges. And you turned me into something you could never defeat." I walked out of that courtroom with my head high, knowing Thomas's legacy was safe, and my soul was stronger than ever. Justice doesn't burn that easy. The courtroom's echoes still lingered in my mind as I returned to the quiet hills where my house once stood. The charred remains had been cleared away, leaving only the foundation and memories scorched into the earth. I stood there with Samuel, breathing in the fresh air that now felt lighter, free of the smoke of betrayal. "Are you sure you want to rebuild here?" Samuel asked softly. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the rising sun. "This land isn't just dirt and grass. It's my life, my husband's dreams, and the memories of who I was before my children lost their way. They took my house, but they'll never take this." For weeks, I worked with a crew to rebuild. Every hammer strike, every nail, felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. I chose to rebuild the treehouse first, not as a place for children's laughter anymore, but as a symbol of survival. The old oak had survived the fire, its bark scarred but strong, much like me. When the new wooden beams rose, I ran my fingers over them and whispered, "We're still here, Thomas." Meanwhile, the trial drew national attention. The media swarmed, calling it the inheritance inferno. Neighbors who had once whispered behind my back now came forward with support, shocked that David and Clara, who had worn such perfect masks, had been capable of such evil. In prison, my children tried to contact me. Letters came, full of rage at first, blaming me for their downfall, calling me a traitor to my own blood. I burned those letters without reading past the first line. Weeks later, the tone shifted. Clara's words turned to pleas, apologies, and desperate cries for forgiveness. David's letters remained cold, manipulative, still blaming everyone but himself. I never responded. Some wounds can heal, but others must be left to scar. One day, a letter arrived not from them, but from the lawyer handling Thomas's trust. Inside was a note from Thomas himself, written years ago, locked away in the trust documents. His words brought me to tears. "Eleanor, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and our children are older now. I hope they've become good people, but if they haven't, I know you'll be strong. Remember, fire can destroy, but it also creates. Whatever happens, never let the darkness win. I clutched the letter to my chest and cried like I hadn't cried in years. Those words gave me strength to keep moving forward. With the inheritance secured and the documents exposed, the authorities seized the forged assets David and Clara had tried to claim. The land, the savings, and every cent they had stolen was returned. I donated a portion to rebuild a local children's shelter, knowing that while my own children had chosen greed, I could still use what I had to help others. Samuel stayed by my side through it all. He became my anchor, reminding me daily that family isn't just blood, it's those who stand with you when the fire comes. Together, we rebuilt the house, piece by piece, until it stood proudly again, stronger than before. But peace is never permanent. One stormy evening, months after the trial, Samuel found me sitting on the new porch, staring at the horizon. "You're thinking about them," he said. "I am," I admitted. No mother dreams of watching her children rot behind bars. "They chose their path, Eleanor," he reminded me gently. "And you chose to survive." I nodded, tears brimming in my eyes. I just hope one day they understand why I did what I did. As the rain began to fall, my phone buzzed. It was a video call request from an unknown prison line. My chest tightened. It had to be Clara or David. Against my better judgment, I answered. Clara's face appeared, pale and gaunt behind the glass. "Mom," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it." For a long moment, I said nothing. Finally, I whispered, "I hope one day you forgive yourself." Then I ended the call. That night, I dreamed of the treehouse again. Not the burning one, but the one Thomas built, full of light, laughter, and love. I woke up with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. But peace can be deceptive, because the very next morning, I found an envelope on my porch. No stamp, no address, just my name written in a handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single photograph of my rebuilt house taken from the woods. On the back, it read, "Justice burns slow. We'll be back." The paper shook in my hands. I looked toward the trees, my heart pounding. Whoever left that message wasn't David or Clara. They were still behind bars. This was something new, something darker. Samuel stepped onto the porch, his revolver already in hand. "What is it?" he asked. I showed him the note. His jaw tightened. "Eleanor, this isn't over." I stared at the trees, my resolve hardening once more. "Then let them come. I've survived worse." Who left that message, and what new danger was waiting in the shadows? The fire may have died, but the embers still burned. You won't believe what happens. Stay tuned, like, comment, and subscribe, because the final confrontation is about to ignite. The morning mist clung to the trees, curling like ghostly fingers around the rebuilt house. I stood on the porch gripping the photograph, the threat scrawled on its back burning in my mind. Whoever had left it had been close, too close. They had walked the same ground Thomas and I once called safe. Samuel stepped beside me, scanning the woods with narrowed eyes. "This isn't random, Eleanor. Someone knows your history. Someone's watching." I nodded, my voice low but firm. Then we watched back. We set up cameras around the property and reinforced every lock. Samuel stayed awake most nights, his revolver on the table, while I clutched the rifle that had saved me before. Days passed in uneasy silence until the first sign came. One night, the security camera captured a shadow moving at the edge of the woods. A tall figure, hooded, standing still, staring at the house for nearly 10 minutes before melting back into the darkness. When Samuel replayed the footage, my stomach twisted. It wasn't David or Clara. The build was different. Someone else was stalking us. The next evening, another envelope appeared on the porch. This time, it contained a single key and a note that read, "You've forgotten someone." My mind raced. Forgotten who? I thought of old grudges, old enemies, but none made sense. Then it hit me, Thomas's business partner, Charles. Years ago, Charles had been caught embezzling and disappeared after Thomas exposed him. He had sworn revenge on our family. Could this be his doing? The following night, the mystery ended. Or so I thought. Samuel and I heard a window shatter. The alarm blared, and the cameras caught the intruder entering the house. He moved like he knew every inch of it, avoiding the beams of light. I gripped my rifle, my heart pounding as Samuel motioned for me to stay behind him. The hooded figure stepped into the living room, and Samuel flipped on the light. "Stop right there," he barked, revolver aimed. The intruder froze, then slowly lifted his head. My breath caught. It was Charles, older, rougher, with scars on his face, but unmistakably him. "You ruined my life, Eleanor," he growled. "Your husband exposed me, and I lost everything. Tonight, I take it all back." "You've already taken enough," I said, my voice trembling but strong. "You've been feeding my children lies, haven't you? You turned them against me."
He sneered.
It wasn't hard. They were greedy. All they needed was a push. Rage burned in my chest. "You used them." "I used them," he admitted with a laugh. "And now I'll finish what they couldn't." He lunged, knife flashing in his hand. Samuel fired, the bullet grazing his arm. But Charles kept coming, knocking Samuel down. The knife glinted as he turned toward me. For a split second, fear threatened to paralyze me. Then Thomas's voice echoed in my heart. "Don't let the darkness win." I raised the rifle and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, and Charles fell to the floor, the knife slipping from his grasp. He groaned, clutching his wound, but the fight drained out of him. Samuel got up, breathing hard, and kicked the knife away. I stood over Charles, the rifle still steady in my hands. "This ends here," I said. The sirens wailed in the distance. Again, someone had called the police. When they arrived, they arrested Charles, dragging him out as he shouted threats. "You'll regret this, Eleanor. You haven't won, but I had won. Not just against him, not just against my children, but against the fear that had haunted me for months." The trial against Charles revealed everything: his manipulation of David and Clara, how he had pushed them toward their violent acts, feeding their greed with promises of wealth and power. While David and Clara remained behind bars for their crimes, Charles was sentenced to life. Justice, at last, had closed its grip. Months later, I stood under the oak tree where the new treehouse stood tall. Children from the shelter I supported now came to play there, their laughter filling the air. The darkness that once surrounded this place had lifted. Samuel joined me, smiling softly. "You did it, Eleanor. You faced every fire and walked out stronger." I nodded, tears glistening in my eyes. Justice doesn't burn that easy. And neither do I. The sun dipped low, casting golden light across the yard. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not the fragile kind, but the kind forged in flames. I turned to the camera, to whoever would listen, and said, "If life ever tries to burn you down, remember, you can rise again. Stronger, fiercer, unbreakable." If this story moved you, if it showed you the power of resilience and the strength to fight for what's right, like, comment, and subscribe. Because no matter how dark it gets, you can always rise from the ashes.